Logic Pro for iPad 2 was released just 3 days ago and is already generating a whole heap of hype and buzz in the mobile recording community. So in this week's Studio Live Today podcast, I'm taking a look at my 10 best features that I've discovered so far. Now, it would be easy to jump in and say, the stem splitter is cool, these session musicians are amazing, the ChromaGlow plugin is cool, and the Chords track is a game changer. We kind of know all that. In fact, if you want to learn how to use all of those, you can check out the other videos here on the channel. There's a link down in the description to the complete playlist. But I thought we would go into some more advanced stuff here. Some of the things hidden in the weeds that maybe you haven't played with or discovered yet that really make this, in my humble opinion, one of the coolest updates we've seen in a very long time. Hello, my name is Pete Johns. Yes, this is the Studio Live Today podcast, and here at Studio Live Today, my goal is to help you create, record, and release your best music. We do that through tutorials, through videos, and through this weekly podcast. Head on over to studiolivetoday.com if you want to catch up with all the latest, or jump onto YouTube and subscribe. You can also get the audio version of this podcast wherever you get your podcasts and your podcatcher of choice. So let us dive in. We're going to do this top 10 style because who doesn't love a good top 10? And we're going to start with number 10. And the feature that I've kind of been waiting for a long time to come to a GarageBand or a Logic Pro is a slap bass. And yeah, as part of the new bass player, which is super duper cool, we now have a slap bass. For those of you that are listening to the audio version, it might be cool to come check out the video version because I'm going to demo these quickly as we go through just so that we can see them. So what I'm doing here is jumping into the bass player. I'm changing up the bass here, and I'm changing it from indie disco to disco slap. And it's just actually amazing because trying to emulate the intricacy of how you play a bass using a slap bass style is really difficult to do. If you've ever used a slap bass plugin, they're okay, but they don't really sound like the real genuine detail. With the new bass player session musician here in GarageBand in Logic Pro for iPad, we have the ability to dial it in. We can add things like dead notes and slides and pick up hits and make it sound really authentic. Let's listen to what the slap bass sounds like here in Logic Pro for iPad. Really cool, yeah. I can't play a bass that well. We're at the point where the bass players, the keys players, and the drummers are now way above what I could program in myself, and definitely better than what I could play myself. Now, I've seen a little bit of criticism around the community saying that you wouldn't use these don't replace humans, these aren't real bass players, real drummers, real keys players. Yeah, I get that. But for many of us, we don't have access to full bands, or we don't have the ability to use professional session musicians. These are going to be great. I also have a feeling, a little inkling, that some of your professional musicians are going to use this for songwriting because it's like having your own virtual drummer that you can say, try this, try that, give this a crack, have a go with some slap bass. So yeah, just the ability to have slap bass. I thought it was a low-hanging fruit, but I've been looking for a good slap bass sound for some funky tunes for a very long time. So that's going to be our number 9 feature. Number 10. Number 9. Let's jump into number 9. This is something that we've been needing for a long time, and that is the ability to monitor a MIDI track or a software instrument or an external instrument at the same time as a audio track. Now, if you don't know what this means, I'll explain it quickly here. So when we're playing an instrument, so what I'm doing here in Logic Pro is adding a new track, and I'm adding a MIDI track. I'm using the Ravenscroft 275, which is an external piano plugin. Now we can play this by just tapping on the keys, or if you've got a MIDI keyboard, which I do over here to my left, you can actually play in using the MIDI keys. But to date, if you had multiple tracks on here and you wanted to play your keyboard while at the same time, say you wanted to record a vocal, you didn't have the ability to use input monitoring to monitor a software track. You could only monitor an audio track. So when you were doing multiple, which I'm showing you here now, when you're using multiple tracks, you don't have the ability to actually monitor multiple tracks. Whereas now we can actually have our recording ready to go on our MIDI track, and we can be playing a MIDI track while at the same time actually monitoring and recording onto an audio track as well. And it doesn't matter where your highlight is. You could have your highlight on any other track, such as these session musicians tracks that I'm showing if you're looking at the video version, and you can still just go ahead and play and record. So this has been a long time coming, and it's a bit of a niche feature, I guess, but for those of us that record using a MIDI keyboard and regularly record MIDI instruments, especially now that we have the cool new session piano, the studio piano. So if you weren't aware, the session piano actually comes with its own studio piano plugin, which is why it sounds so good. It's a really beautifully sampled piano, and you can change it between a studio, a classic grand, a vintage upright, or a mono single mic'd piano. So, like I say, won't be for everyone, but if you are a MIDI player and you use MIDI keyboards, that's going to be a good one. We'll jump into number 8. And that is soft drums and bass. What do I mean by soft drums and bass? Well, if you've used GarageBand or Logic Pro, you'll know that if you want to do things that are kind of heavy or hard, it's a lot easier to get something that is in your face as opposed to something that is going to be more subtle. So for those of you that want to do some, nice yacht rock or some jazz or just some laid back chill vibes, we now have the ability to do that because we've got some great options, such as the brush drummers. These are kind of the first thing I do when I want something a little bit more laid back, is that I come in here and I'm changing up the drummer. I'm going to change it from a funky songwriter to a roots brush. So this changes the kit, the drum kit, to the Blue Ridge kit, and it means that they're going to hit the snare with brushes as opposed to using sticks. So it gives you a much softer sound. Let's hit play and take a listen to this, shall we? Hear how it's just very subtle and very laid back compared to the sort of things that we've been able to get in the past, and it's nice and subtle. And to go with that, our bass player now has a really good upright bass. So let's do the same thing here. We're going to change the bass from the disco slap that I'm in love with, but change it up to the roots upright to go along with our roots brush kit. And we very quickly get ourselves a very nice sounding combo here with this one playing our drums and our bass. Really soft, really subtle. The other cool thing that helps us get in that kind of jazzy vibe is that we have swing settings, so we can really start getting more jazzy. If we swing, we are adding some swing to these, we can get a really kind of laid back swinging jazzy vibe in just a couple of clicks. Very cool. And customizable out the wazoo as well. So check out my other videos about the drummer and the bass player if you want to find out more about that. But soft drums and bass, finally, some subtlety in our session music players. Next up is number 7. This is another one that's not going to be for everyone. It's our MIDI. It's another MIDI option. Or maybe I should have grouped the MIDI options together. But this is related to the chord tracks. So if you haven't learned about the chord tracks, these are amazing. They give you the ability to actually add chords that your session musicians will follow. So in this case, I've got this little progression where it's going from an E to a B to a C sharp minor to an A, and it sounds like this. How good is that? Yeah, so being able to dial in our chords is really, really cool. But it can get a bit fiddly when you're editing chords, when you're having to enter them, because to enter them, again, for those that are listening in, I'll explain, we need to tap on the chords track, we need to ungroup the chords if they're already grouped in a progression, and then if we want to change each individual chord we have to change, we need to tap it, we need to tap on edit chord, and then we need to tap the root note and set the root note. We then need to tap whether it's minor, whether it's suspended, augmented, diminished, a fifth, a seventh, a ninth. You get the gist. Whereas you'll notice at the bottom, if you're looking, or I'll tell you if you're listening, at the bottom we have use MIDI input. And when I tap this on, what I'm doing here is I'm picking up a MIDI keyboard and I'm playing a C chord. And it will instantly change to a C. Then all I need to do is go to the next chord and hit an A minor. And it instantly changes to A minor. I go to the next chord and then I go to a D minor. And then I go to the next chord, and what should we finish on here? Let's go with a G7, a G major 7. And it adds those chords directly in without me having to manually actually dial them in, which means that now when we hit play, why is it sounding so bad? Well, that's because there's two places that we can adjust our chords. Yeah, and this is another part. This is sort of this is a double one because I wanted to give you a double whammy here. We also have the region chords track, which means you can have separate chords on your region compared to your overall global chords. Now, you wouldn't do what I did there and make them completely different in a different key, but what you can do is actually paste the chords from the global track to the region, and then you can tweak them a little bit if you wanted to. So that's another way that you can do it. And you can do the same thing here. We can tap and go to edit chord there, and we can actually tap in using our MIDI keyboard again. Once you hit use MIDI input, and it will actually play and add that chord, so you can get some chord variations in your regions compared to your global track, and then you get a better sound, hopefully. That sounds cool. And then it changes up. So you can get really easy and quick chord changes. So MIDI chord input, that's our number 7. Number 6, manual patterns. So have you ever been using the drummer and thought to yourself, you say, I wish I could do a pattern that's just like boom ba boom boom ba boom ba boom ba. But you can't quite find that when you go to the patterns browser. Guess what? You can manually add in your own pattern now. So I'm going to go into the drummer. I'm going to go into the manual tab, which is the third tab along on the top, and I'm going to put in a boomp, a bap, and then a boom boom, and then a bap, and then another bap. I know, it's easier to see than it is to explain, but you can basically dial in your kick and your snare patterns manually, and then your drummer is going to play that. So I've gone a snare on the one, and then a kick drum on the one, a snare on the two, a double kick drum, and then back with a snare, and then a very last minute snare that goes back in to the kick drum at the start of the pattern. Let's play this and see what it sounds like. I made that. I know. So yeah, and the sky's the limit here. So if you want to vary things up and get, all fancy and complex, you can do that as well. So having the ability to manually dial in your own patterns is super, super fun. I'm just going to make this a little simpler again because that was a bit nuts. The other thing you can do, obviously, is the same thing. Maybe it's not obvious, but you can do the same thing with your bass player and your piano player. So you can make your bass player have its own manual pattern, and then you can do the same with the piano, with the keyboard. And you can make them all the same if you want, or you can mix and match them like I have done in this example. I've just randomly assigned different rhythms for each one, and when we play it now, this could do anything. Yes, you would probably want a little bit more uniformity than that. And the cool thing is it's really easy to just reset these. So you can come in here and go, oh, I made a complete gaff of this. I'm going to reset all of my manual stuff. I'll leave it on the drums because that sounded okay. So the ability to dial in manual pattern, and this is where, people that say the session players and session musicians in general, when you're using these virtual ones, you're stuck with the options that they give you. I think this is an example of where you're not stuck. You can actually change it up and put in your own manual patterns, and it's going to make your song sound different to everyone else's, which is the most important thing. Because for the longest time, when we're using GarageBand and Logic Pro, and you're using these virtual instruments, you know how you can just hear? You're like, yeah, that's Kyle on the Sunset kit playing the second preset from the top. Whereas now, I think there's so many options in here that people are going to be able to have at it and create great and varied tunes with Logic Pro. Number 5, yes, we're into our top 5 already, and that is ghost notes and grace notes. What are ghost notes and grace notes? Well, they're the difference between someone like me playing drums or playing keys, where I can hold a beat, I can do a ish, ish, and I can play chords, but I don't have the ability to add in those additional little bits of flair. It's like the movie Office Space. The pieces of flair that you need when you're playing drums or playing keys are those little trills, those little bits in between. Let's give you a demonstration here. I've fired up the old drummer again, and I'm going into the Details tab here, and there's a big knob right in the middle. I'm going to turn that down to 0%. So you're going to hear these drums with no ghost notes first. That's how I would play the drums. Boom da chi da, boom boom da chi da. So it's cool, it's fine, it's good. Sometimes you want that level of simplicity, but sometimes you want those little bits in between to make it sound cool, and that is ghost notes. So we're going to grab the ghost notes dial. Let's dial it to 100 so we can really hear the difference, and now hit play on this one. Hear how you're getting those little shuffle elements in between, those little off hits that just make it sound delightful. And when you bring it back in, it really just adds to the overall performance. Lovely. The other thing we have is on our keys, we have a similar thing called grace notes. Grace notes, whenever you hear that little da-da, that da-da, like just the note that just hits before, or little trills or little fancy bits. I like to call them fancy bits because I like to get a bit fancy. Let's grab this piano track, turn the ghost notes down to 0, and listen to this part. Now this time, I couldn't even play that because that's a pretty complex part already. We do have the complexity up a little way here on the piano. However, if we add grace notes, let's turn the grace notes all the way up to the top. If you're watching the video version, you'll see them. You can actually visualize them being added in there. And if we hit play now, hear the da-da. See how it's adding in those little accents? And again, that can make the overall sound a lot more interesting to listen to. Very nice. Number 4 is the ability to control the snare hits in our drummer. So yes, a lot of these things are based around the session players. I know. But who knows? We've still got 3 to go. Some of your favorite features may be in that top 3. But the ability to control the snare has always been difficult with the drummer, because what it would do is if you had the intensity up high, it would play a really loud snare hit. And as you dropped the intensity down, it would move to a rim shot or a side stick. But what if you wanted it to still be intense, but you want it to only use the side stick or a rim shot? Well, now you've got that control. So I've changed the drums up here so to get more of a funky kind of beat, which sounds like this. And you can hear there it's up there on the snare. But what if because this is with more of a jazzy kind of ensemble here, what if I want those snare hits to instead be side stick? Well, I can do that. I can go here into the Details tab. I can jump down to the snare option and change this from either center of the snare to either rim shot, side stick, or even a tom drum if I want to do that. So let's go with the side stick. And now when we play back this drum, Now, some folks have said, oh, but it still sometimes plays the snare. Yeah, it will on a fill. So if we turn the fill amount and the fill complexity up, you'll hear that it will still hit snares when it's doing a fill. But for your regular snare hits, it's going to use just whatever you program in there. And if you don't want any of those, just turn your fill amount down to 0 and you'll be golden. There's other similar things that we can control, such as the cymbal. So we can decide which cymbal we want to use, either the ride, or you can bring the ride up onto the bell, or you can use the crash cymbal, or with your hi-hat, you can decide if it's open or closed. So you've got customization and control over your drum sound here, which can help you really dial in a relevant drum sound and get something like this. Yacht rock fans of the world, unite, because this is going to be cool for your soft rock where you just need a little side stick action in your verses, and then you can move it back up onto your snares when you hit those big choruses. Number three is ChromaGlow. Yeah, the ChromaGlow plugin is awesome. And specifically, I know you're saying, well, yeah, that's pretty boring. You're just saying it's the ChromaGlow plugin. You've already showed us that, Johns. But specifically the presets. So, if you haven't ever played with the ChromaGlow, it is a plugin available in Logic Pro for iPad 2. It is recommended that you have an M1 iPad or better to use ChromaGlow. You can use it on other iPads, but it does use quite a bit of processing power. What I've done is I've grabbed my drum kit here, these nice drums that we've put in, and I'm going to go to my plugins, and I'm going to tap on the Audio FX. I'm going to go to Distortion, and I'm going to tap on the ChromaGlow. And it's immediately going to open it up in a little window at the bottom, but I'm going to double tap it to open it in a big window. Now, the reason that I say that ChromaGlow presets are what you want to focus on is they really do help you, give you a starting point, somewhere to jump off from to actually dial in your sound. So, for instance, if I go to the presets, it says default preset right now, but there's groups here. There's bass acoustic, bass EDM, bass electric, drums, guitar acoustic, guitar electric, keys, master bass, and vocal. So all of your standard instrument types are all covered here. So we're going to go drums, and we want something that's just going to help these drums out. Like there's things like crushing and darkening and heavy, but maybe we want something like just the highs, please. So we've tapped on just highs, please, and it's dialed in some settings. Let's take a listen to these drums. Isn't that cool? Like you can just pull out those frequencies, but also have your drive to be able to drive it up. What if we wanted to go more of a modern style with this? We can tap the modern. It's changed our settings here to a modern tube, and it's set the drive. It's added a bypass to it so that it's only going to do it on frequencies over 490 hertz. And now we can take a listen again. And it really does add, if you don't know what the ChromaGlow plugin does, it's a saturation, exciter, outboard gear, analog emulator. It just kind of sweetens. It's the magic dust that you can put on your sound. So for instance, if we turn it off on these drums, we'll play it and I'll tell you when I'm about to turn it on. So we'll start with it off. And I'm going to turn it on now. Hear how it just lifts the sound? It's hard to explain, but easier to hear. And the other cool thing is that with all of our other instruments, we have the same thing. So if we wanted to go to, say, our piano here, this is our piano sound, we can do the same thing. We can add the ChromaGlow. It's already got ChromaVerb on it. We can add ChromaGlow as a plugin and do the same thing here. We can go to keys. And what do we want? We want some clean keys here. So we can tap the clean keys plugin, and I haven't actually added anything for that one. What about the crunchy distort? We probably don't want that. Let's just go with the presence. So this is just giving it a little tiny squeeze, and it's going to be a lot more subtle than some of the other presets that we might want to try. Turn it off. See how it's just bringing it up? So the ChromaGlow plugin, and I'm going to be perfectly honest with you, I was a little underwhelmed when I first used it. I thought, Yeah, okay, it's a saturation plugin. We have those already. But little did I know that the modeling in there sounds really good, and those presets for all of your different instrument types, including, by the way, your master bus. So it's not just about putting it on individual tracks, you can also put it on your entire master bus if you want to get a nice, warm, analog sound to your overall mixes. So you go, ChromaGlow. That rhymes, and you know that rhymes. All right, number two. This is actually a really cool thing. So, in case you weren't aware, when you're using the session players, yes, we're back focusing on these session players. When you're using the keyboard in particular, you can actually use any keyboard sound, any sound you like, anywhere within Logic Pro. So yes, you look at it at first and you're like, oh, it's keyboard player. There's like 5 styles. How is this going to help me with my tracks that don't want a piano? Well, no problem. You can change the patch so easily. All we need to do is, if you're following along, if you're not watching the video, is tap in the bottom left corner and you can go to your instrument patches. Now you can search here, you can search organ if you want to add an organ, you can try different patches and try whatever you like. So for instance, if I wanted to grab this easy piano, I'm just going to tap on it. So what we can do is just tap it and it will replace. That was me previewing it again. But if we tap not on the preview, turn the preview off, but on the actual instrument, if we have our replace button on, it'll change up our piano. Now that's not really changing it much, but we have, what about this Wurlitzer, this modern Wurlitzer? That's interesting. The other way to add it is to tap and drag it across and just dump it right on the old piano and it replaces it up straight away and you can instantly get some pretty funky sounds. So you're not stuck with just a piano. You can put anything on here. And a little bit of a tip, you can even use it for other patches like maybe some strings. So I'm just searching out strings here and we'll find something, some authentic strings. And we'll use this. And you can instantly get a really interesting string preset. I don't know how much I would believe that that's authentic strings. Anyway, and the other thing is if you want to then change the style, you can tap on that. And if you disable the change patch button, it won't actually change the patch. It'll leave it on the one we've selected there. So if we wanted to see what this would sound like as a pad under our track, we can just tap the simple pad and it will now add it as a pad. Let's take a listen. I actually really like that. I might leave that in there. So yeah, it's really easy to be able to change up your instruments, change your patches and experiment. So when folks look at the keyboard player and saying, I don't want piano in this track, what track doesn't benefit from a pad? And with all the options that we have here, with you can turn on and off the left and right hand, you can make it much lower or much higher, you can change it from a full chord to just a couple of notes. It's going to be an easy way for songwriters to start experimenting with their songs. So there you go. There is the number 2. Before we announce number 1, I would like to have a drink firstly, but I would like to give some honourable mentions here. I didn't include Stem Splitter. Stem Splitter is awesome. If you don't know about it, you can bring a track in and it will split out the vocals, the bass, the other instruments, and the drums. Now that's really cool, but it's a very specific use case. And for me, as a singer-songwriter, I don't see myself using it a whole heap. It's going to be handy when I need it, but it'll be one of those things that'll be there when I want it. If I was a big remixer, if I wanted to sample songs, if I wanted to pull vocals out, my use case will probably be mostly for karaoke, to be honest, to be able to sing along to a track and pull those vocals out so that I can sing along to the backing track. Or I want to remix a song like by adding some new effects or sort of kind of remaster an old song like that new Beatles song. Same sort of thing. That used similar kind of technology. So that is very cool. There's some new MIDI features that are in here that I don't use, so you can use external MIDI gear in a much better and different way. I can't say that I understand that enough to even show it. So there is a bunch of other cool new features in here in Logic Pro for iPad, but these are my favourites. There's also the patterns, the fact that we've got all the pattern selectors, we've got the filler mounts, the perform again. This is actually brilliant. Maybe this should have made the top 10, but you can, if you've got, say, your drums here, I'm going to play them. You've dialed in all your settings and you know the settings are what you want, but it's just not quite right. You can just hit the perform again button and it will tweak the performance a little bit. Maybe just move a couple of kicks or just change up slightly. And if you do it again, yeah, you get an even different sound. So that just gives you a bit more variety. So again, you're not going to sound like everyone else. You can hit that button and the magic AI, is that the first time I've mentioned AI in this podcast? The magic AI can do the change for you. However, my number one thing, and look, I think this addresses the biggest criticism that virtual players and virtual instruments have, which is they are too perfect. They are a machine. They are not a human. Have you heard this? I mean, I've thought it myself. I'm like, no virtual instrument is ever going to sound as good as a human because humans are imperfect. Humans make mistakes. And some of those happy little accidents, where my Bob Ross fans at, those happy little accidents can actually make or break a song. So I present you the Humanize button. Yeah, we have the ability to humanize our tracks. So whether it's your drums or your bass or your keys, you can decide how much you want to humanize these things. And I reckon that's pretty cool. So if we go to the details and we add some humanization to our bass and to our drums, then, they might just sort of be just floaty a little bit more. Let's take a listen. Just a little more loosey-goosey. So I just think that is a great addition to be able to say, we don't always want it to be perfect, not right on the grid, because that's the number one thing. Your human ear, it's like the uncanny valley when you're looking at something. It's why faces are so hard for AI to get right and numbers of fingers, is it doesn't quite look right. And it doesn't quite sound right when your music is right on the grid. It's why ghost notes and grace notes are important, and it's why the humanize function is my favorite addition to Logic Pro for iPad 2 when it comes to everything that we've seen. Could this all change over time? Of course, we're 3 days in here, folks, so I haven't had a lot of time to play with all these, but I would love to hear from you. What is your favorite feature? For those that have used Logic Pro for iPad 2 already, what are you liking? What do you think is going to be the killer feature for this new update? If you've checked it out, let me know down in the comments here on the video, or you can always email me, pete@studiolivetoday.com. Always happy to hear if you've got questions, comments, or anything else. If you're watching the video version of this, thumbs up because the sun's up. I would love for you to leave a like and leave a comment. If you're listening to the audio version, ratings and reviews are always appreciated on your pod place of choice. That is going to do it for this episode. Don't forget, if you are learning Logic Pro for iPad 2, we already have 7 tutorial videos and 2 live streams, and now this podcast, that is being added to all the time. So check back often, and there'll be all the latest information about everything you need to know about Logic Pro for iPad. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As we say at the end of each and every show around here, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and keep creating. I'll see you soon.